Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
I always hated the way my family did barbecues, not because I didn't like ribs or the smell of charcoal or my dad's terrible 80s playlist echoing off the side of the house, but because there was always this unspoken theater going on beneath the folding tables and plastic chairs. We weren't a family so much as a rotating cast of characters, performing the same damn script every year like clockwork. There's always a golden child, always a black sheep, always a quiet aunt who drinks too fast, and a loud uncle who never reads the room. And there's always me, stuck somewhere in between, just trying to keep my mouth shut and my dignity intact long enough to escape without needing therapy. Again. This year's barbecue was in July, during one of those suffocating Midwest heat waves that makes the sky look like it's been filtered through a microwave. The grass was dry, the beer was warm, and the tension was already ripe by the time I parked behind my cousin Brad's new lease truck. I had to laugh. He doesn't even like trucks. He just likes being seen driving them. When I walked up the driveway carrying a covered tray of deviled eggs and 2 bottles of overpriced kombucha, I could feel eyes on me. Aunt Linda gave me her usual once-over, that glance that says, "Oh, you've put on a little weight, but I'll smile anyway." While Cousin Brad was already holding court near the grill with a solo cup and that fake deep voice he uses when he's trying to sound smarter than he is. It's about creating a digital community for real makers, you know? Giving crafters the tools they need to thrive without Etsy's fees, kind of like Shopify meets Pinterest, but with actual soul. That was my line. Exactly my line. I stopped cold on the stone path, blinked once, twice, and forced my feet to keep moving like nothing had happened. My stomach twisted in that slow, rising way it does when your gut realizes something before your brain catches up. I didn't say anything yet. I just played my part, laughing at Dad's predictable joke about charcoal being a young man's game, and letting my sister drag me into a conversation about our high school principal being arrested for stealing football funds. Normal stuff. Harmless. Safe. But the whole time I was listening. Watching. Noticing how Brad kept name-dropping my phrases, the exact ones I'd told him during a long, stupid drunk call 2 months ago when I thought maybe, just maybe, we were reconnecting like real adults. I'd shared everything. The name of the site, the mock-ups, even the tagline I'd brainstormed in a 3 a.m. haze after downing half a bottle of red and crying because I thought nobody believed in me. Guess someone believed enough to steal it. Uncle Gary eventually pulled me aside near the old oak tree behind the garage, where the string lights ended and the bugs got thicker. He was holding a beer like it was a goddamn staff of wisdom, that smug look on his sunburnt face that always meant he thought he was about to say something profound. "Listen, sweetheart," he started, using that tone that made my skin crawl, like I was still 10 years old and being told to smile more. "I know you're smart. We all know that. But Brad, well, he's had a rough few years. He needs this." I didn't say a word. I just let him keep talking, digging his own grave, word by manipulative word. "So why don't you do the right thing and just let him run with the idea? You've got plenty of time. You'll come up with something else. But him? This might be his only shot. Let him have the win." I laughed. Loudly. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I might have started screaming. Or worse, crying. And I'd done enough of that over this family. "You done, Uncle Gary?" I asked, still smiling. He blinked, a little thrown off by how calm I was. "I just think it's the decent thing to do," he muttered. And that's when I tapped my collarbone, right where the little clip-on mic was hidden beneath my sundress strap. A tiny red light blinked once before I palmed the remote in my pocket and gave it a squeeze. I hadn't come to this barbecue for food or family or fake hugs. I came with a plan. And Gary? Gary had just handed me the match I needed to light the whole damn thing on fire. "Thanks, Uncle," I said sweetly, my voice as calm as dishwater. Then I turned and walked back toward the patio, past the cheap paper lanterns and the flies swarming the watermelon slices, past my dad arguing about gas prices and Aunt Linda gossiping about her neighbor's divorce. I walked right into the heart of the party, heart pounding, smile steady, hand in my pocket still gripping that mic remote like a secret weapon. Behind me, Gary stood frozen, still holding his beer, completely unaware that his words weren't just bouncing around my head anymore. They were about to bounce off every speaker on this godforsaken property. And once they did, nothing would ever sound the same again. Let me tell you something that sounds dramatic, maybe even paranoid, but sometimes the only way to really figure out who's screwing you is to let them think you're too stupid to notice while you quietly hit record. I wasn't born suspicious. I was made this way, one blindside at a time, starting with the 5th grade group project where I did everything and Lisa got all the credit because she had a louder voice. That's what happens, especially when you're the quiet girl who people mistake for polite when really, you're just calculating. So when Brad started asking me too many questions about my business, too many specifics, it wasn't some lightning bolt moment of betrayal. I'd seen this pattern coming from a mile away. It was the lazy kind of theft that insulted me most. He didn't even try to cover his tracks. It was a week before the barbecue when he called me. I remember because I was on my 3rd cup of coffee, in the middle of debugging a payment gateway issue on the back end of the platform I'd been building for over a year. He said he was just curious about how I'd gotten started, about what tech stack I was using, whether I'd registered the domain yet. It wasn't the questions themselves, it was the way he asked them, casually, with this rehearsed tone that didn't match the interest. You know how people ask you something when they already know the answer, just checking to see if you're going to lie? That's how he sounded. Except he was the liar. I got off the phone and stared at the wall for a long minute, heart thudding, mouth dry. And then I pulled the drawer open and took out the little wireless mic I'd bought on impulse months ago after reading about some woman who caught her boss on tape calling her too emotional to lead. I hadn't even opened the box until that day. But now, suddenly, it felt like insurance. Not in a courtroom kind of way, more like emotional insurance. Like, if someone was going to stab me, I at least wanted to watch the blade going in. I tested it on a podcast app first, just to make sure it picked up ambient sound. Then I set up a private Bluetooth sync with the old outdoor speaker system Dad had half broken but never thrown away. It still worked if you knew how to bypass the pairing code, which I did because I once spent 2 hours trying to stream Christmas music at Mom's insistence during a December snowstorm. Took me about 358 seconds to hack the speaker system. That's like, what? 4.5 minutes? I had no plan yet, just a growing gut feeling that this wasn't paranoia, it was self-preservation. So I rehearsed. I tested mic placement in different tops, tried whispering, mumbling, even rubbing the fabric to see if it would be too noisy. I'm not proud to say it, but it felt kind of good, like a quiet power blooming in my chest. I was finally getting ahead of the play, not just reacting. By the morning of the barbecue, I was ready. My mom thought I looked nervous, but it was just adrenaline. My hands weren't shaking because I was scared. They were shaking because I was finally holding the match. The mic was clipped beneath my dress strap, the transmitter tucked into the waistband, the audio syncing with a phone app one could kill or activate at will. The Bluetooth link to the speaker was a bit tricky. I had to wait until the playlist switched to Dad's phone, then slip the override on my end. The hard part was doing all that while holding a plate of coleslaw and smiling at my aunt who kept going on about how Brad had such a rough go lately. You know what nobody ever asks? Why women like me are always tense or cold. Maybe it's because we're too busy watching our backs to relax. Maybe it's because we've been told too many times to sit down and be generous while someone else steals credit we bled for. Brad stayed near the grill most of the afternoon, lording over it like a priest in a sacred ceremony, soaking up compliments like a dry sponge. I watched him with a kind of detached calm, like watching a spider make its way into a trap it doesn't know you've already set. I nodded at the right moments, made a few sarcastic jokes, kept the playlist running like nothing was wrong. I smiled through potato salad, laughed through fake toasts, and hugged people I barely tolerated, all while waiting for that one perfect moment. And then it came, Uncle Gary pulling me aside like he always does, thinking he knows best, thinking I'll cave because that's what I've done in the past. And this time, I let him think it. I gave him the rope and watched him tie the knot himself. The second he finished saying those magic words, "Just let your cousin take credit," I knew it was go time. I slipped inside, walked past the kitchen where my mom was spooning baked beans into a cracked ceramic bowl, and into the back room where I kept my phone and the speaker control. My palms were sweaty. My chest was tight. But my mind? Clear as glass. I stared at the controller, thumb hovering over the volume sync. "Let's see how golden Brad really is," I muttered. Then I pressed the button. The moment came faster than I expected, yet it unfolded in such slow, agonizing detail that I can still picture every blink, every twitch of someone's lip as they realized what was happening. We were just about to take the annual family group photo, you know the one, with people squinting against the sun and trying to hide their drinks behind their backs like grandma's ghost would haunt them for sipping Coors Light before 6. My dad was fiddling with the timer on his ancient camera stand like it was a ticking bomb, and someone had just yelled for Aunt Sandy to stop talking and get in the frame. That's when the outdoor speakers, those crusty old towers of warped plastic and stubborn wiring, crackled to life like some divine intervention was about to happen. And I guess it did, in its own twisted way. At first, it was just a sharp burst of static, enough to make people glance toward the patio, thinking someone leaned on the wrong button or maybe the Bluetooth had glitched. Then, suddenly, like a sermon from hell itself, Uncle Gary's voice rang out through the backyard, booming and unfiltered, louder than any of us had ever heard it in real life. "Just let your cousin take credit. He needs this more than you." The words hung in the air like wet laundry on a still day, not swaying, just heavy and undeniably present. There was a moment, a long, agonizing beat, where nobody moved. Nobody even breathed, I swear to God. It was like the whole backyard went into suspended animation, the hot dogs mid-flip, the lemonade mid-pour, the fake smiles halfway stretched across people's faces. Then the meaning hit. Not just the words, but what they meant. The context, the implication, the ugly truth that couldn't be shoved back into someone's mouth once it had crawled out and screamed itself through those dusty speakers. Aunt Linda dropped her plate mid-bite, and the shatter of ceramic on patio concrete might as well have been the starting gun for chaos. Brad's face drained of color in real time, like watching milk pour into black coffee. He turned toward me, his mouth half open, eyes darting, calculating, stammering without making a single goddamn sound that meant anything. My mom's hand shot up to her chest like the betrayal had reached out and physically grabbed her by the collarbone. And my dad? My dad said what everyone else was thinking but didn't have the balls to ask. "What the hell was that?" That's when I moved. I turned on my heel, as calmly as if I'd just remembered I left the oven on, and walked straight toward the cooler on the back steps. I grabbed a beer without even looking, cracked it open with one clean pop, and took a long, bitter sip while my heart jackhammered in my ribs. I didn't look back, not yet. I didn't know them that. The bomb had gone off, and now they had to live in the crater. I heard footsteps, quick, clumsy ones behind me, shoes dragging against pavement in that panicked, half-running way of someone trying to get in front of a disaster already too far gone. Brad. Of course it was Brad. He caught up to me just as I reached the edge of the house, one hand grabbing my arm, the other raised like he could somehow explain the sky falling if I'd just give him 30 seconds and my full attention. "You ruined everything," he said, breathless, voice sharp with that wounded, pathetic edge that made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. "Why would you do that in front of everyone?" I turned slowly, let my eyes meet his, calm and clear and just a little tired, because at that moment, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was done. Done pretending to be surprised. Done acting like his betrayal was some kind of fresh wound instead of just another crack in the concrete I'd been walking on since childhood. "No, Brad," I said, my voice steady but cold enough to freeze water. "You did that the second you opened your mouth." He flinched like I'd slapped him, and maybe I had, in the way that the truth does when it finally stops being polite and starts showing its teeth. Behind him, the sound of my name started bouncing from mouth to mouth, people calling for me, people asking questions, trying to understand, trying to put the pieces together. But I wasn't in the mood to explain anymore. I'd done my part. I'd laid the trap, and he stepped in it with both feet and that stupid smug smile. There's a special kind of silence that follows public embarrassment, the kind where no one wants to be the first to speak because they're afraid whatever comes out of their mouth will just make it worse. That's the silence I left behind me as I walked toward the front yard, the taste of cheap beer bitter on my tongue, the summer sun hot on the back of my neck like judgment itself. The playlist had stopped. The party was over, whether they wanted to admit it or not. As I passed the driveway, I saw Aunt Linda crouched over the shattered plate, picking up broken pieces with shaking hands while muttering something under her breath. My mom stood next to her, stunned and small, like a little girl trying to disappear. Uncle Gary was nowhere to be seen. Coward. And Brad? Brad stood frozen near the grill, face flushed with something between fury and humiliation, surrounded by a silence so dense it could have drowned him if he weren't already sinking on his own. I didn't smile. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, I needed to breathe. I needed to think. Because the drop wasn't the end of this story. It was just the sound of the rope finally snapping. There's something eerie about the way silence lingers after a public explosion, like smoke after fireworks, sticking to everything and everyone even when the sound is long gone. The day after the barbecue, I woke up with that familiar heaviness behind my eyes, the kind of weight that doesn't come from alcohol or lack of sleep, but from carrying the emotional hangover of setting a bomb off in the middle of your own family. My phone had buzzed itself nearly off the nightstand sometime around 3 in the morning, but I hadn't checked it. I already knew what I'd find, half-hearted texts from people pretending they were just checking in and not, in fact, trying to pick sides without admitting they were picking sides. When I finally dragged myself downstairs, still in the shirt I'd slept in and with my hair looking like it had gone through an exorcism, my mom was already at the kitchen table. She looked tired, like someone who'd aged overnight. She didn't say good morning or do you want coffee, which was her usual go-to even when she was furious. She just looked at me and sighed, like I'd just brought a tornado through her living room and asked her to clean it up. You could have handled that differently, she said, and her voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't gentle either. It was the kind of tone that punches harder than shouting ever could. Gary says it was just a joke. Said you took it out of context. I laughed, too sharp and too fast, like I couldn't help myself. He said what? I asked, and I knew I sounded like a smartass, but I didn't care. Since when is asking your niece to surrender her business to a 38-year-old man-child considered a joke? Mom pinched the bridge of her nose like she was trying to physically block my words from entering her head. I'm not saying he was right, she said. But maybe it didn't have to be public. That's when it hit me, that low, slow gut punch that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with what daughters hear, even when mothers aren't saying it out loud. You're not mad that he said it, I said, barely managing to keep my voice from cracking. You're mad that I didn't keep it quiet. She hesitated, which was confirmation enough, but then she muttered, You've always been ambitious, Emily. Maybe too ambitious for your own good. That one hurt more than I expected, more than it should have, honestly, considering I'd long ago accepted that my mother came from a generation that believed conflict was best handled by pretending it didn't happen. But something about that sentence, too ambitious for your own good, stabbed deep and left a mark. Because it wasn't about the mic or the speaker or the barbecue. It was about years of being told to sit quietly while my male cousins got the spotlight for mediocrity, and I was told I was showing off for doing well in school. It was about the countless holidays where I was asked about boyfriends and marriage, while Brad got asked about his latest business venture, even though most of his ventures ended in debt and disappointment. Around noon, Brad texted. No apology, of course. Just one line, hope you're happy now. I ignored it. An hour later, he showed up at my door like we were still 8 years old and fighting over a Super Nintendo controller, demanding resolution on his timeline. He looked like hell, eyes puffy, shirt wrinkled, that smug energy completely gone. For a second, just one stupid second, I almost felt bad. "I didn't mean for it to go that way," he said, standing just inside the doorway like a child waiting to be scolded. "You blindsided me." I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. "You stole from me. I caught you. End of story." He scoffed, the last thin thread of his ego snapping under the weight of his own guilt. "You didn't have to humiliate me." That was cold. Vindictive. That word, vindictive, landed like a slap across the face, and suddenly I wasn't standing in my house anymore. I was 10 again, being told to stop overreacting when my cousin took credit for my science project. I was 16, being told to be gracious when a boy cheated off my math test and got praised for understanding the logic. I was 25, being told by a manager to stop making male coworkers feel stupid during meetings. "You call it vindictive," I said slowly, making sure every word landed like a nail into the coffin of his argument. "I call it justice." He didn't reply, just stood there breathing hard, like he wanted to say something else, but couldn't find a version that didn't make him sound like the villain. "Go home, Brad," I said finally. "And next time, try coming up with your own damn idea." He left without another word, slamming the door just a little too hard, like that could reclaim some ounce of control he'd lost. I thought that would be the end of it, that the damage had been done, the dust had settled, and we could all go back to pretending this family was one good casserole away from healing. But then, that night, I got a message from a friend in the startup circle. A local investor had taken a meeting with someone named B.T. Carson, pitching a platform for vintage artisans to sell directly to niche audiences, my exact concept, word for word, but rebranded under some generic tech bro nonsense like CraftX. And here's the kicker, he pitched it after the barbecue. He didn't even have the decency to stay buried. I stared at the email for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard, heart thudding like a war drum in my chest. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It never was. This was about being told to shut up and sit down, about being told that playing nice was the same as being respected. And I was done playing nice. There comes a point where anger burns itself out and turns into something colder, quieter, and far more dangerous, clarity. That morning, after reading the email about Brad's pitch to the local investor, I didn't scream, I didn't cry, and I didn't call him to deliver some righteous monologue he'd only half listened to while pretending to be the victim. No, I did something he would never expect. I went silent. But not still. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started filing paperwork. Not just notes or scribbled napkin sketches this time, not just half-written emails saved as drafts while I debated whether it was worth the fight. I filed the trademark, all legal and binding and airtight. I submitted the patent documentation I had started drafting months ago but never finalized because I didn't think anyone would be stupid enough to try and take what wasn't theirs. I made it official. The name, the logo, the functionality, every last inch of my creation was mine now, stamped and registered and indisputable. And then I gathered the receipts. I pulled every text Brad had ever sent asking about my platform, highlighted the parts where he probed for specifics about vendors and revenue models. I dug up the time-stamped screenshots of the prototype I shared with him months ago in what I had stupidly called a moment of family trust. I compiled the email where I'd casually mentioned the name I was planning to use, the same name he pitched with a few trendy buzzwords slapped on like fresh paint over stolen wood. And, of course, I attached the mic audio. That glorious, awful clip of Uncle Gary's voice advising me to step aside because Brad needed it more. All of it was neatly packaged into one folder, zipped tight and titled Ownership Proof _final. I wrote one email. Just one. It was addressed to the investor Brad had pitched. A man named Martin Huxley, someone known for his hands-off attitude and deep pockets, the kind of investor who'd back a half-baked app idea if the presenter walked in wearing the right watch and used enough words like disruption and scalability. I kept the message short, professional, polite. I told him I believed he may have been presented with a business concept under false pretenses. I invited him to review the attached evidence at his earliest convenience. I didn't threaten legal action. I didn't beg. I just offered the truth. And then I waited. 2 days later, I got a reply. One sentence. One that hit harder than I'd expected, because deep down, I still hoped that truth would win over flesh. Thank you, but we're moving forward with Brad's version, less emotional baggage and more scalable. That phrase, less emotional baggage, kept circling my mind like a wasp trapped in a jar. It wasn't about the product. It was about me. About how I didn't smile enough. About how I spoke plainly and didn't coat my intelligence in sugar. About how the moment I stopped being polite and started being direct, I became a liability. The baggage wasn't in the product. It was in my refusal to shrink. I stared at that email until the screen blurred. Then I closed it. And I didn't cry. Because what's the point? The system isn't broken. It's working exactly the way it was designed, to reward the polished thief over the raw creator. But I wasn't done. Not yet. That night, I bought the domain name Brad had used in his pitch. It was still available, probably because he thought ideas moved faster than paperwork. I bought it, parked it, and redirected it to my actual platform. Anyone who typed it in would land on my homepage, under my logo, with my name in the footer. And it would stay that way forever. Petty? Maybe, but effective. A week later, I got a message from someone trying to access Brad's site. They were confused. Thought they were supporting a new, edgy platform for artists. Instead, they found me. I welcomed them personally. Gave them a discount code and a story they could tell at dinner. As for Brad, I never heard from him again. Not directly, at least. I heard from other relatives, of course. My dad said Gary was furious, but didn't want to get lawyers involved. Aunt Linda sent a weird, passive-aggressive message about how families go through storms and everyone deserves a second chance, but I left it on read. My mom eventually stopped asking questions, stopped bringing up the barbecue altogether like she could erase it by omission. And me? I moved on, sort of. The platform gained traction, slowly but surely, built on trust and sweat and late nights. I didn't get the flashy investor. I didn't get the media spotlight. But I got something else, something that Brad and Uncle Gary and people like them will never understand. I got the truth. I didn't win the funding. I didn't win my uncle's respect. I didn't win back my family. But I won the truth. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing of all. Late one evening, I stood alone in my living room with the mic in my hand, just holding it like a relic from a different life. The apartment was quiet, lit only by the blue glow of my laptop and the echo of a playlist I no longer needed to hijack. I smiled, but not all the way. Not with my eyes. Not with my heart. Because I still wonder, did I really win? Or did I just lose differently? What would you have done?